Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. We bring you thought-provoking guests and topics every week to challenge your thinking about leadership. Our aim is to help you become the leader that you wish you always had as we learn together and lead together. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honoured today to be joined by Yoshiko Stowell. Yoshiko is a Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at an organisation called AmyriAD. And AmyriAD's an interesting organisation that has a all-female leadership team in what is a biotech startup organisation. And today we're going to focus a little bit about what that means. What does it mean to have an all-female leadership team? What does it mean from a perspective of diversity, equity and inclusion? Yoshiko is also very active in organisations like Women in Bio, an organisation that encourages more women to get into the biotech and these type of industries. And she's also active in an organisation called RAPS, which is the Regulatory Affairs Professionals Society, and in Toastmasters International, which also has a focus about encouraging women in the workplace, women in leadership roles. So I'm really excited about today's conversation. I've really no idea where this one's going to go. It's going to be a great casual conversation talking about diversity, equity and inclusion and how we can continue to champion the cause to increase gender representation and to remove gender inequality in the workplace. So without any further ado, Yoshiko, please say hello to our audience. And I'd love to hear a bit more about your background and what led you into the roles that you're in today, but also this passion about Women in Bio, about RAPS, about Toastmasters. So Yoshiko, over to you. Tell us your backstory.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you for having me today. I was born and raised in Japan. After finishing my bachelor's degree in chemistry, I decided to come to the United States for graduate school. I studied chemical engineering for a master's degree and then wanted to join a pharmaceutical industry. So I started my career in R&D doing hands-on lab work. Then I transitioned my career from research to clinical studies and then to my current profession, regulatory affairs.
All right. So really interesting background there. I'd like to unpack two parts of that. How long did you live in Japan before you moved to the US?
21 years.
All right. So how would you reflect on the differences in culture between those two countries? And I'd like to really go straight to the point about gender equality. So Japan and US, I'm going to say, have very different cultures when it comes to gender equality. How did you make that transition and what reflections can you share with our audience about the differences?
Yeah, the stereotype of Japanese is still the case, that people are almost equal. You don't want to stand out in Japanese culture. Even when you're good students, you want to be normal. You want the same thing as everybody else. You want to behave the same. So I felt like my opportunity was limited in Japan, especially in the male-dominant culture. And when I was in university, I had an opportunity to talk with a professor in the US and decided I want to challenge myself to go outside of the country.
So when you arrive in the US and you start seeing the difference, you start seeing the US is far from perfect, by the way, and there's pros and cons with both. A very kind of equality-driven organisation versus the individual. I'm going to say the collective culture of Japanese culture where people don't necessarily stand out as individuals versus a very entrepreneurial, individual-oriented culture in the US and a different approach to gender equality. How did you adapt to that and what did you learn about yourself?
Yeah, what I like about the US is that the more you work, the more you get recognized and the opportunities comes to you. So I felt like the more effort I put in for myself would be the effort will pay off in the country of inclusive culture like in the US.
All right, good. So I can see that for sure. Now I want to unpack a different part of your introduction, which is going into chemical engineering. I think it's still the case today that women are generally underrepresented in that field. In engineering in general, it's certainly true. In technology fields, it's certainly true. How did it feel for you as a young, aspiring woman going into the field of chemical engineering?
Yeah, definitely. In chemistry or chemical engineering, the women's ratio is probably less than 10%. But women's tends to be the most hardworking, diligent students. And I was definitely a nerdy student in my school days, but I think I learned to stand up for myself because, majority is men around me. But when you actually work hard, you can be recognized, but you have to kind of learn to survive in that kind of environment with myself being the minority.
Yeah, interesting. I want to unpack that a little bit further. So you said hardworking, and I certainly see that in most women that I work with in my industry and in my field, which is also a heavy engineering and tech field for sure. How do you feel like that was you naturally coming forward as being hardworking, or did you feel that you had to make sure that you could stand out in a male-dominated world, that you had to try harder? Was it natural or was it, tell me more.
I think it's a little bit of both. Being Japanese, I think that definitely Japanese in general are very hardworking. So I had that work ethic, work hard. But also being a minority in my department in chemical engineering, I needed to work hard. And as an individual contributor in the junior members or students, I think you have to work hard to the best of your ability.
And do you think that was to your benefit, or do you think there was part of it that I'm going to say that you had to play a role, you had to adapt? What I'm angling towards here, Yoshiko, is we always talk about we want people to show up as their authentic self and for their own superpowers to be recognized, to work in an environment where they flourish because of who they are and what they bring to the table. And what I'm hearing, there's a positive that it's kind of pushing you a little bit to work hard and get recognized. But I also have this negative thing in my head about, well, that means that Yoshiko is not able to be herself. Do you feel that, or tell us what you feel there?
Yeah, actually, I think my personality is, somewhat, I'm a perfectionist. So I wanted to do my best at all times. But as I get older and gain more experience, I learned that it's okay not to be perfect.
Yeah, okay. All right. So good. So I can see that you're learning as you go. That's wonderful. And what I'm also picking up here, which allays my fear a little bit, which I'll come back to in a moment, is that, yes, there was this expectation that you needed to, you felt an expectation that you needed to go above and beyond, but it sounds like that was quite congruent with your own personality anyway. So it wasn't like poles apart from what you wanted to do. Where I was coming from that, and I think I'm a little bit older than you, Yoshiko, but this is not a thing about age, it's about generation. The generation I grew up was one where women were heavily underrepresented in leadership roles, even more so than today. And the women leaders that I remember when I was a young person in the workforce, most of them took on male traits, and it was almost out of necessity. I'll talk about world leaders here for a second. Margaret Thatcher is considered to be one of the most dominant female leaders in politics back in those days, but she was more masculine than most of the men that she worked with. She was called the Iron Lady, right? Through to today, where we do seem to have a much more recognition that no, women when they bring themselves to the table, they're a better leader, they bring more diversity, they bring different thinking, etc. And it's to embrace the differences between men and women that help us to develop a greater leadership team. So that's where I was going with that question, is how much are you playing a role and doing what's expected of you versus being your natural self? Any reflections on that from your experience?
Yeah, I think meant to be more of individual player. They try to get on the top by winning and others. Women's tends to be more team player. We pull ourselves up. We help each other. We build a community to elevate each other. So being a woman, I definitely feel more empowered by people around me, whether more senior person pull me up to the next level, or I play a role of mentor to help a junior person.
Really interesting. And just a note for the audience, you can probably see in our conversation already that Yoshiko and I are already starting to use a bit of stereotypes, some a little bit of implicit bias, etc., and some generalizations. And of course, generalizations can be dangerous, but they can also be useful when we unpack them. And this one that Yoshiko is bringing to the table is useful. Have a think about what she's saying, that men tend to be individuals, women tend to be more team players and wanting to work with others. And have a think about the power of that, right? So every one of us is only given 24 hours every day. If you're an individual contributor, your ability to impact the world, to impact the team, to impact your customers is limited by your own capacity. When you're a team player and you're able to bring a team around you where everyone is contributing, now we've got a force multiplication. And a team all working in the same direction will outplay an individual any day of the week. How does that sit with you, that little reflection, Yoshiko?
Absolutely true. It's not limited to women, but in any company with diverse population.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so that leads me to an interesting point. So you are in a all-female leadership team. Is that going too far the other way, where now we don't have a male voice at that table?
We used to have male employees at our company. We are a startup for treatment of Alzheimer's disease, and we are at the transition stage, and it just happened that our performing teams happen to be women. So currently, women are leading the company, but as we grow as a company, we're not limiting other male.
All right. This was not by design, but I guess it's a reflection that wonderful that women leaders came through and shone through, merit-based appointments, and you, at this moment in time, you have an all-female leadership team. It wasn't by design that you set out to only be female and to exclude men. It's just a moment in time. Okay. What do you think the advantages are?
Yes, similar to what I said before, I think women have this work well in a team environment. So even in a small startup, we feel supported by each other.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. The other one I'm thinking of here, I don't want to put thoughts in your own mind, but I'd like to hear your reflection on this. We're going to talk in a moment about women in bio, women in tech, women in engineering, etc. And one of the things they often miss, role models. And when there is a role model that they can see that is 2, 3, 4, or even 5 steps ahead in their career, and they can see, I can make it to the top table, it can be quite inspirational. And when that's not there, the glass ceiling, if for want of a better word, I don't like that word by the way, but the glass ceiling becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because they look up in the organization ahead and they see that, hey, there are no women at the head table. Why do I want to work harder for this organization? I'm not going to get there.
Yeah, for me as an Asian woman, we even have bamboo ceiling on top of glass ceiling. And I learned that I found an organization called A2C, A Player Becoming C Executive, led by Asian female CEO. And her philosophy is that there are women out there who became the board member or who became the C-level executive, and let them help others. And I like how she say, like the Rapunzel let down her hair, the women in the leadership can help others and beat that ceiling. It's all about our mindset shift.
That's another interesting one there. So the Rapunzel let down your hair. I love that, and help people to climb and to show them that there is a path. Show them that there's a path to the top table. I like that a lot. I also feel like it's a big responsibility and obligation. Do you and the rest of the team at AmyriAD feel that? So when you're women sitting at that table, do you feel that responsibility? Do you feel that obligation to make sure that you are being the role models for the next generation of female leaders coming through?
Yeah, I'm a mother of 3 daughters myself, so I'm really big into trying to raise the next generation. So that's why I started volunteering for Women in Bio.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go to that now. Let's talk about women in bio. A lot of industries out there are still underrepresented today. So engineering is probably the most, but there might be others, probably road construction and things like that as well. So there's a lot of industries out there that have a heavy underrepresentation of women today. In the organisation Women in Bio, in the organisation RAPs that you're involved in, and Toastmasters, etc., what approaches are you taking to encourage women to take that step into these industries?
So I'll start with the Women in Bio. So Women in Bio is a nonprofit organization. We have about 14,000 members in the United States. We have 14 local chapters. I'm one of the San Francisco chapter leaders. And Women in Bio was developed from the students to the boardroom, from the academic to industry. We built this organization because we felt that there is a need to help women get into the biofield. It's when you're students, like you may feel like there's no path forward, but there are so many examples out there. And we as a leaders are responsible and for showing the next generation that there is a possibility.
When do you think it starts, right? So you went into chemical engineering, so that's at the university stage for you. But when do you think it starts? Like, you're a mother of 3 daughters right now. At what point in a young woman's life does it start this thought, yeah, I am going to go into engineering or I am going to go into technology? Do you think that waiting until university stage is too late, or is that okay? Any thoughts?
Anybody can make any changes at any point, but I used to take my daughter to a lab when she was so little. So she used to come to the lab, put the gloves on, the lab coat on, and it was so natural for my daughter to see the science, to the experiments I was running. And that's why all 3 of my daughters wants to be scientists.
Oh, that's cool. You must feel very proud to hear that, by the way, because you are their role model. You are their hero, I'm sure. Yeah, so interesting around STEM activities, right? So potentially from a very early age, getting involved in science and technology, engineering and math, so that it's not, and we'll talk about societal expectations in a moment, but it's not that's a male thing, or men or boys go and play with, science experiments for fun. No, it should be encouraged for everyone.
Right. Yeah. I play with my youngest daughter, 6-year-old. We do a lot of science experiments at home, just as easy as putting the Mentos in Coke and see the bubble coming out. I think that kind of excitement is important for young girls.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I'm going to say even like things like Lego. Like Lego was huge when I was young, but when I grew up, boys played with Lego. But now I do see much more gender equality in Lego, including the marketing of those products and the products themselves. They're marketed more generally across boys and girls now, but that wasn't the case when I was growing up. Now, let's talk about that societal expectation. So how much of the gender inequality that we have today do you think was driven by just societal expectations? Very interesting with you coming from Japan, by the way, because it's a different societal expectation there. But, the roles that we play in the world, you're a mother of 3, and I'm sure that you feel at times, I don't want to put words in your mouth again, so I want you to reflect on this. I'm sure you feel expectations as both mother and vice president of regulatory affairs, right? So how do you balance those, and how much of that do you think plays in the gender inequality that we have today?
I think there is still a gender expectation. For example, when I go to a male-dominant meeting, I feel like women are expected to prepare for the meeting room or prepare for coffee, things like that. I think that's still a silent expectation that women should do those things. I feel that I don't let that stereotype or image bring me down. I think I'm willing to do any task. I don't feel like I'm good to do something, some easy job. I'm willing to do anything. And I think being authentic self at any moment is really important. When I'm at school for my daughter, I'm just a mom. But when I'm at work, I have this vice president of regulatory affairs position. Right. And people may look at me differently depending on the situation, but I think it's very important to keep true to yourself.
How does it feel when that happens? Like, I feel strongly about this, that it should not be the case, right? But being a man, I've never been in the experience that you've talked about. I've never been in a meeting where there's a feeling that, Yoshiko, you're the woman in this meeting. Why haven't you organised coffee? I mean, the fact that exists infuriates me as a bystander, but how does it feel when you're the subject of that?
Yeah, I try not to let that bother me. Being an Asian, relatively petite female, I had people treat me in a rude way, even at the fast food restaurant. When I first came to the US with a strong accent, people treat me very poorly. But I stopped acting to someone who misbehaved, because if I let that fact bother me, then it only brings me down. It doesn't help me be a better person. So if someone treat me poorly, then I would say, maybe that somebody had a bad day, that somebody else doesn't have a bandwidth to treat someone nicely. So that, that is a reminder that I need to, treat other people better.
Yeah. Okay. So well done on your resilience on that. It's a nice mindset that you have there. And the two reflections I would share to you is when someone does do that, well done on the perspective as well. They might have been having a bad day, but regardless of that, it speaks more about their character than it does of yours. So when someone does behave in a way that's out of line with, I'm going to say, modern expectations, right? The other question I want to ask there though, is about allyship, right? So now picture that you and I are in the same meeting and I'm on the side and I see something like that, and it does infuriate me, I can tell you. When I see any kind of gender, race, age, any kind of discrimination or implicit bias becoming explicit, it really does infuriate me. But what advice do you have for an ally? What would serve you best at that moment? So in a moment where you're not treated as an equal and you have this expectation thrust upon you, if I'm the bystander who looks at it and is appalled, how can I serve you best at that moment?
If I'm put in a situation like that, where emotion will kick in, I might ask for a quick pause, because I cannot perform at my best if I'm really furious inside. So I might ask for a quick break, whether it's a bathroom break or coffee break, and just put myself together. And I feel that when I'm calm and I treat the other person with the respect, the other person naturally treat me better as well.
I love the emotional intelligence of what you're talking about there. So you're regulating your emotion and you're staying calm, and you'll get a calmer response and a more professional response if you do that. That's really good advice. Where I'm going with the question, to go a bit deeper, is what is going to serve you best at that moment, right? So my natural tendency would be to speak up, right? And I think that's the right thing to do, but I want to test it, because if you're in a situation where you are not being listened to, let's say the next thing we should say about women representation on boards, on leadership teams, etc., is getting a seat at the table is not enough. Getting a seat at the table is not enough. We need to hear your voice. And I can tell you, I've sat on countless boardroom tables where there's been a woman in the room that has come up with an amazing idea, the best idea in the meeting without any doubt, and it gets talked over. And then 5 minutes later, a crusty white male, which I know I fit in that category, but a crusty white male will bring up an almost identical idea, maybe phrase it slightly different, whatever the case may be. And everyone goes, oh, yeah, well done, what Jim said. And it drives me insane. Now, where I'm getting with what would serve you best, if I step in at that moment and go, hang on a second, Yoshiko came up with that idea 5 minutes ago. Did no one hear that? That's what I feel like doing. And I feel like that's the right thing. But the negative part of my brain is then it reinforces, Yoshiko couldn't stand up for herself. Mick had to. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, this is a very common story, I think, but creating an ally is a good thing, because in a room, whether it's boardroom or regular meeting, there will be someone who's outspoken, but that outspoken person may not be right all the time. So we need to have an ally or system that allow other voices to be heard. For example, if the meeting is facilitated by someone, let other person talk. The opportunity to pass that ball to someone else who might be quiet but have the good ideas. And that's a responsibility of the leader to create that kind of culture. You talk about the psychological safety in your other podcasts as well, but I think that psychological safe environment to have healthy conflict is really important.
Yeah. What tips do you have, or what have you done yourself or you've seen in rooms? What are the tips that you can provide to our audience about how to create that?
Be a good listener yourself, because we have control of how we behave. So active listening is really important, and be open-minded, because that other person who's outspoken might have some good ideas, and your idea might be related to that person's idea as well. So, be a good active listener and read the opportunity. And when the opportunity comes up for you to speak, then take that opportunity to speak. I think one of the tips that Toastmasters International has helped me is to be a better active listener, and also to be better impromptu speaker. Basically, when you talk about, 10 minutes, people may lose attention, but I think it's really important to be able to say something you want to say in a concise manner to not lose, someone else's attention.
Yeah, really good, Yoshiko. And there's a few things I'm taking away there. The first one is coming back to diversity. The reason why we want diversity is to drive diversity of thought, diversity of thinking, diversity of ideas. And if we're not listening to each other, we have a collection of ideas, but we're not building. We're not building anything. And come back to our point before about individual contributors and team members. The power of a team is their ability to create something that they couldn't have otherwise created if they weren't a team, right? So if we're not listening to each other, and if we're not dynamically listening to each other and building on each other, right? So one of the greatest mistakes most people do is they think that listening is waiting for your turn to talk, and then you just say what you were going to say. But kind of generative listening would be for me to hear your idea and go, oh, that's really interesting, Yoshiko. And what I think is if we do this as well, what do you think? And then you build, and then I build. And then if we have 6 or 7 people around the table, all of a sudden the ideation is just, going off the scale. But we can't do that if we're not really listening. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, because I think most people tend to think while hearing, not listening. We need to pay 100% of the attention to the person talking and don't think about what, sometimes we have a stereotype that the other person's wrong and you're already thinking about how you're going to respond. But I think we need to be open-minded. The other person might be right, at least 20%. I read it in a book. You have to assume the other person is right at least 20%. That way you're more paying attention, and that creates more engaging relationship.
So there's a few things I'm taking away there, Yoshiko. Taking your point about Toastmasters and extemporaneous speaking, it's dynamic and it's adaptive, and it is that ability to park for a moment what you believe to be true so that you can allow someone else's ideas to flow into your head. And if you're not doing that, if you're only listening for the things that confirm what you already knew, you're not going to leave that table any wiser. But if you're really listening with an open mind, an open heart, an open will, and allow it to come, Yoshiko's onto something interesting here. I've never heard of that before. I'm going to tap into that, as opposed to, I'm going to say that many people just listen to things that confirm what they already believed before the meeting even started. Any thoughts there?
There's no need to have a meeting, right?
Exactly. Why are we here? Yeah. Okay. So any tips you've got for the audience? I'm going to take back to what you were saying about the responsibility of the leader, right? So we all have our individual responsibility that we can show up to a meeting with an open mind. We can actively and deeply listen, that we can build on each other's ideas, etc. So there's an individual accountability here. But you said something interesting before about the responsibility of the leader or the facilitator that's running that meeting. What tips can you have for people out there that want to create this environment of generative co-creation? What tips for the person facilitating or leading the meeting could you give?
If it's an internal meeting with people that you already know, learning everybody's speaking style and personality is important. I think being a leader is start with the self-awareness and learn about different leadership style and adapt your leadership style to the situation and circumstance. And the next is to understand who the audience is, what their leadership style is, and then adjust your leadership style to foster that collaborative environment.
So I like that a lot. So it's a heavy element of adaptive leadership, but it started with self. So know yourself and then know the team around you. And when you tune into that, you can create the environment where everyone can find their voice. Yeah, really good, Yoshiko. All right, I want to kind of start drawing us towards a close, but I'd like to hear from you any final tips that you would give to either leaders out there that are wanting to create a diverse workplace with women representation much higher than it is today, or any young aspiring women in the workplace that look at your role in a vice president role in an amazing company. What tips do you have for the next generation coming through?
I wish I learned that the leadership is empowering others. I think leadership is an action, not the title. So anybody can be a leader. And leadership doesn't mean that you're the top individual performer. Leadership is someone who can empower others and bring the best idea to create that better outcome as a team. So I encourage the younger generation to look for mentors. Don't underestimate the importance of learning from others. No question is embarrassing. I think being in a community, find a community where you can learn from and take that opportunity to learn.
All right, that's wonderful, Yoshiko. It's been really great speaking to you today, and thank you for being a champion for this cause. I mean, you're working with 3 non-for-profits to champion the cause of making sure that women voices come to the table and are heard. So thank you for all the work that you do there. Thank you for your insights today around both leadership and also for the young women that are coming through and how we can continue to do better. Thank you for your tips around allyship. That was also really helpful as well. So I'd like to draw us to a close now with our rapid round. So these are the same questions that we ask all of our guests. So what's the one thing that you know now, Yoshiko, that you wish you knew when you were 20?
I wish I knew it's okay to be me. When I was 20, I was constantly trying to learn and be better and thought like, oh, I'm not good enough. I will be better if something. And that's a bad, thinking, right? I think it's okay to be myself. It's okay to be you as an audience. Just be authentic and, just think that the learning is a lifelong journey. We have to constantly learn even when you become a leader.
All right, brilliant. They're great 2 tips there. One about authenticity and one about always learning and growing. Wonderful. What's your favorite book?
The recent book I read is called Disruptive Mindset by Charlene Lee. She was one of the speakers at the conference I recently attended, California Conference for Women. And she talked about our current environment. She called it permanent crisis, constant changes. And she said that the comfort and growth don't coexist. We have to be outside of the comfort zone and just know it's okay. Her definition of confidence is that, knowing you'll be okay no matter what the outcome is. And that's the true leader.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, love that tip about confidence. And just a little hint, I'm quite certain, like if I look at my lineup and schedule of future guests, she's coming on the show in the not too distant future. So yeah, wonderful. All right. And what's your favorite quote?
Every failure is a gift and opportunity. It's from Positive Intelligence by Cesar Chamin. I like his quote.
Yeah, Shazar's very amazing as well. We need to get him on the show as well. I've looked into his work quite a lot, and positive intelligence is definitely something for people to look into as well. Finally, if people are interested to know more about you, either personally or about Women in Bio or about RAPS or the work, all the different work that you do, how do people find you if they'd like to know more, Yoshiko?
Yeah, I think there's only one Yoshiko Stowell on LinkedIn, so it's very easy to find me. So LinkedIn is probably the best place.
All right, wonderful. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show today. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your insights and the tips that you've given to our audience today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mixbeers.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care, Look out for each other and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.